today it is my pleasure to be joined again by my friend and colleague Evarist Bartolo, one of the former foreign ministers of the wonderful island nation of Malta. Evarist, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for this conversation.
It's great having you back because you also wrote this article here. Let me see if I can show it about, what some of the fantastic revelations from the Epstein files, right? And it's entitled "The Rupture is Much Deeper. Unless oligarchs are banished from our political systems, they will continue to corrode our democracies and harm the rest of the world they want to subordinate," says Evarist Bartolo. I mean, this is the entry to your article. And can you maybe just lay out for us a bit what your argument in this article is?
Well, I refer to Mark Carney's speech, the Canadian Prime Minister, when he talked about the rupture. For Carney, it seems that the rupture is where it hits the part of the West which is dominated by the United States. But so far, it has managed to get along very well, as he himself said, that the so-called rules-based order, which he also at the same time at least had the intellectual honesty to say that, well, he said part of it was false. I would say that more than part of it was false because it worked for those who designed it, and those who designed it were the United States until it worked for the collective West of, I don't know, 12, 14% of the world. Then it's okay. When it didn't work anymore for them, then it's a rupture. I say that the rupture is deeper because when we look at the Epstein files, it's not a matter of a number of rotten apples here and there, some rotten apples in the States, some rotten apples in Scandinavian countries, in the UK. It's actually the orchard is rotten. It's not just a few apples or it's not just a few trees. And I think if one sees the network that emerges in those files, in that information, bringing together business interests, technology, military, security, the media. It's a whole ecosystem. I call it a habitat, which allows that to happen. Because even till a few months ago, when for example, let's just take one case, of Peter Mandelson, and you know that over the years, the media in the UK, and as a former British colony, I can tell you as a journalist, we were brought up to think of how important investigative journalism is, that you hold power to account, that you ask difficult, uncomfortable questions. And this wasn't the case. These people, whether they are former presidents of the United States, former ministers, big oligarchs, the media gave them a very easy ride. No uncomfortable questions were asked. So this is a system. And I wonder, Pascal, because both of us, you obviously much more than me, coming from the academic world, when we teach geopolitics, are we sticking too much to abstract theories and not showing our students how the real world works? Because the real world works more like what we find in Epstein files than sometimes what we find in the theories of geopolitics. So I think that it would make sense for us to really try and understand what this network is of very powerful people coming together and to make the system work and to make the system works for them. So when we talk of the post World War II world, and we talk of the financial business setup that was brought into reality after the Second World War, it's also created the conditions for a network of corruption, a network of of very strong business interests that then generate not only inequality and social injustice, but also war.
Hey, very brief intermission because I was recently banned from YouTube, and although I'm back, this can happen anytime again. So please consider subscribing not only here, but to my mailing list on Substack. That's pascalotta.substack.com. The link's going to be in the description below. And now back to the video. I mean, I had this discussion just this morning, that the social injustice and all of the violence that's happening, for instance, inside the United States, clearly also manifests outside of it, right? And the way that the social injustice is actually important for the war state, because somehow you need to recruit all of the cannon fodder that you need, and all of the recruits, right, to go out and then project force. And what easier than from a mass of impoverished ones. What the Epstein files to me show, though, is that the elite class, the top 1%, the ones with really a lot of money, that money automatically seems to translate into also political influence among themselves. What's just so surprising is that it was so large and widespread. And what's also surprising to me is that it seems to be a phenomenon of the collective West, and maybe not. I need to differentiate here, because we don't even have, as far as I know, we don't even have Japanese names in those files. Maybe we do, but not very much, not on the level of Mendelssohn and so on. This is a transatlantic network, first and foremost, of elite circles that amongst themselves then create these the bribery, and also uh, whatever Epstein was building with his compromat that he was building up for be it for Israel, be it for his own purposes, or whatnot. But it's a Euro-Atlantic, Euro-American kind of project.
Yeah, Pascal, I think it reminds me a lot of the Trilateral Commission, but
The
seen
Trilateral.
from below. Because the Trilateral Commission, sounds so good, and generates studies and reflections on where the world is going. But then you see what the other side is, the side that they don't want us to see. Now, I think if we know a bit of history, we know that elites have behaved like that for centuries. So, to a certain extent, we shouldn't be surprised, whatever, because it reminds me of a Latin proverb, no, which says that there is a law for gods and a law for animals.
Yeah.
The law for gods is, for the privileged, that the rules that you set up, and again, I go back to the rules-based order that Carney refers to. So there are the rules for the gods that have designed and created those rules. And then there are the rules for the colonized, for the 88% of the world, and they are the animals. No, they are the ordinary human beings, where the privileged laws, which only which are only good to protect the interests of the top 1%, do not apply. So when Carney sort of lamented that now it doesn't seem to work for us anymore, well, it hadn't worked for the majority of people living on this planet, you know.
But does that not also just reflect that, as much as we would want to believe in the West that we are democracies where, the people rule, and yes, the system is imperfect, and yes, sometimes you have bribery, but overall, we go to the polls, we go to the polling stations, we vote, we cast our opinions, and people's power at the end of the day will succeed. It's a charade. It's a charade. It's a make believe of actual political incorporation, when, for as the matter for fact, there is this oligarch class that rules these countries like fiefdoms, and they think about it in those ways and in those terms, and that's nothing new. That's not the 2010s that brought this about. That that's how the system was. So are
But,
you?
but that's why Pascal. Let's go back to the Greek classics, no, that on which we say we have built our
Mm,
democracy. And even in my article, I quote Aristotle when he said that in our Greek democracy, which also had obviously its very severe limitations,
Mhm.
leaving out, women leaving out the the ordinary human beings and the slaves, but they had a mechanism to control oligarchs, no, which they called ostracism. That whenever they had a very powerful individual, also because of his money, they actually used to banish them from the system because they used to corrupt the system. Now, in our case, what has happened in the last decades is that we have allowed oligarchs, not only have we not banished them from the political system, we have allowed them to take it over. And this brings us back to what happened in the ruling of the Supreme Court, no, in 2010, when the Supreme Court in the United States allowed unlimited use of money to fund candidates and to fund political parties. And since then, I think what happened in the United States has spread in different ways. Though there are frameworks to control the flow of money, to support candidates and to support political parties, our democracies have become plutocracies. They have become now systems run by people with money and in their interest. And that is why, again, one of the points that I make, which I think is painful, is that people are sort of preferring demolitionists like Trump
Mm.
to fake builders because they come in to demolish. I'm definitely not proposing that we should have that kind of solution for the problems in our political systems. But people have lost trust in our parties and in our politicians because they see them that they make the system work for the powerful and the wealthy, where donors count much more than voters. So the agendas that are being drawn up in our so-called democracies is the agenda of the powerful, is the agenda of the wealthy, is the agenda of the people with money rather than what we need. And tying together this is the military industrial complex, which today is not just a military industrial complex. It's technological, it's business. So instead of building, for example, take Europe, instead of addressing our problems, we think that the shortcut is rearm, and we think that that is going to solve our problems.
But there's this one kind of riddle to me. Like if we look at the Western states as run by oligarchs and by money interests, which then, I mean, I think this is true, but and this then gives outweighed influence to the policy preferences of this group of people. And this group of people, also as we saw in Munich, but as we also saw in Davos and so on, they're kind of an epistemic bubble, right? They have a very specific outlook on the world, and then they try to push that on all the countries, and then create a foreign policy about it, especially in Europe. But why this animosity of that group, of this transatlantic Epstein-esque network of elites? Why the animosity toward Russia and toward China, and why this drive to constant dominance by this group? Because this money elite could just as well be in cahoots with the money elite in Russia and in China and in the rest of the world, right? And in cahoots with those together, create a much bigger bubble, and much more successfully be repressive toward their own individual poor people, right? Why is that not happening? Why is
Yes,
there
it can be explained. It can be explained for the simple reason that if the kind of Russia and the kind of China that these people want is to have politicians and oligarchs in Russia and in China, which will not be sovereign, which will not work in the interests of Russia or China. We have seen this. You know,
with
let's go to another speech. Let's go away from Carney and go to Marco Rubio's speech just 3 weeks after Carney in Munich, in this case, where it was a lament for what happened in 1945. So, for what happened in 1945, where countries started gaining their national independence, he sees it as a cause for lament, not a cause for celebration. For the majority of the world, gaining independence and gaining sovereignty was a cause for celebration. Finally, we have started to gain some control on our destiny, and we will start using our territory, our resources, our decision making in our favor. Did the former empires embrace this? No, 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 no. And in fact, you can see a list of invasions, coups d'etats, assassinations to punish all those leaders in former colonies, including, I would say, China, because they wanted to be sovereign. I mean, we now are dealing with the Iran issue.
Mm.
Way back in the 50s, Iran was already choosing a path for democratic development, and Mossadegh was overthrown for the simple reason that he said the oil is ours and we should use it for our own benefit. Now, if we go to China, let's jump forward to Russia. They wanted Russia to be the Russia of Yeltsin,
Yeltsin,
not
yeah,
the Russia
not Gorbachev, yeah, Yeltsin.
the Russian of not the Russia of Gorbachev, and not the Russia of Putin, and for the simple reason that um, Putin wanted to say, listen, our resources, we should use them in our interest, and you see the agenda of those who say we want to defeat Russia. We want to cut up Russia in small parts so that we can take its resources, and we want to make sure that it runs itself in a way that is okay for us. It's not equal partners. And that kind of animosity is not just towards Russia, it's not just towards China. I think it's towards the end, the rest of the world, which is not ready to be subordinated anymore and dominated anymore. And I see that the biggest clash that we have in the world today is, on one hand, domination. And Marco Rubio's speech was an appeal. Listen, let us not let domination die. Let us not let the old world of imperialism die. Let's prolong as much as possible the idea of empire, which is built on domination. It's not built on coexistence. It's not built on living with others. It's built on living over others.
And and the one thing I'm afraid of most is that this ultimately breaks down to the inability of this class of people in the West, the inability to share. They do not want to share. They don't
No,
want to share with the outside, and they don't want to share
no,
with the
no,
inside. What
no.
what and what really, really scares me with this thought is that when we use kind of a Marxist framework of saying like, okay, the capital needs labor in order to serve them, we might be at the verge where that is not true anymore, where we not only have the automation but also the artificial intelligence in order to outsource all of the serving part, where we might be at the brink of something very, very dangerous when that kind of non-sharing Western capital suddenly discovers that it doesn't need all of that excess population in the global south and the excess population at home, right? It would be much nicer if everybody in the Epstein-Class had their own golf yards, miles and miles long. I mean, these people, to me, have a real problem with their social abilities, or how do you perceive them?
But again, Pascal, this comes from the arrogance of centuries of being empires and of being
Right.
superior to others. There is a beautiful phrase by Kishore Mahbubani, who says that a multipolar world is not just a multipolar world and not just a multilateral world. It is a multi-civilizational world, which means that you accept that it's not the dominance of the West only, but also the other cultures and the other civilizations. Now, in Munich, Marco Rubio was saying, "Oh, how beautiful the world was before 1945,
Mhm.
when we had missionaries, we had soldiers, going and civilizing the rest of the world and dominating the rest of the world without seeing what the consequences of genocide, of the destructions of civilizations, of exploitation is. And we must remember that Marco Rubio is not a Cuban. Marco Rubio is somebody whose ancestors came from Spain as colonizers. They did not come to Cuba to liberate it. So when we talk of Marco Rubio as a Cuban, he is from that part of Cuban which was the colonizer, which wasn't the settler, which wasn't the colonized, And I think that is still how they still see the world, and that is why they applauded Marco Rubio so much, as if, to prolong this idea of domination of colonialism, because it's colonialism in a different way.
What this then means, what we are currently waiting for. I mean, we are speaking today on February 27th, and the United States has half of its navy parked in front of Iran. It's like we are not waiting for the war between the US and Iran. We are basically, this is the next round of the civilizational war and struggle of the West against this, in this instance, Persia, right, against the Persian civilization, to reassert dominance under this kind of Israeli European American conglomerate.
The only thing I think that can save us at this moment, because I repeat, it's the clash between those
Mm.
who want to live over others and those who want to live with others,
Yes.
in the sense that those who have been dominated for so many centuries now refuse to be dominated anymore.
Mm.
Those who dominated want to continue to dominate. That is the biggest clash that we have at the moment. What will save us? And I say this with sadness, because I'm really not against, finding ways of peaceful coexistence through sitting down together and reaching an agreement. But it seems that the only thing that will save us is that what might keep the United States from going to war is that Iran today has enough defense and offensive capabilities to really hurt the interests of the United States. Because it seems that they know that the new missiles and the new generation of missiles and defense systems that Iran has will really inflict a lot of damage on the United States in terms of the fleet that it has, and in terms of Israel. That seems to be the only part of the calculation where they say, and even US generals have been raising this issue, no? Are we sure that we are in a position to go in, intervene, and leave?
Yeah, but this is the depressing thing about this situation, and also about international relations theory, right? Realism in IR will say, like, oh, this is just how states behave, either because humans themselves are very violent, or because states, the way that they behave and are security seeking, are ultimately violent. The John Mearsheimer school of thought. But then Jeffrey Sachs once criticized him, saying, like, look, this is less of a realist theory and more of a description of how the West runs its affairs, and then it just maps its own intention and its own brutality on everybody else. But the thing is that if it does so, if it maps its brutality on everybody else, and if it refuses to understand anything but deterrence itself, then, well, it kind of obliges the other ones to exactly that, and it creates the very reality that we pretend that was there from the beginning, but then the outcome is the same, unfortunately.
I agree with you, Pascal. And unfortunately, this is the case. Well, let's go back 70 years ago, 71 years ago, when Nixon said it will be good to have a balance of power, and not only the United States will be a great power, but you will have Russia, you will have China, you will have India, and you will have others. It sounds very nice. And we now should be at the moment where there should be a balance of power. But to do that, you need to respect others, and you need to believe in the logic of diplomacy and not in the hard power. Because, as you said, then what that kind of attitude generates is that only hard power matters, is that it seems that the message that it passes is the best way for you not to be dominated by others, even at the expense of making your people suffer, is spend on military power. So, North Korea, the only way that it wouldn't be attacked is have a nuclear bomb. So the message is the best way to defend your sovereign rights is to have a nuclear, arsenal. But that is suicidal. I mean, it's a global suicide for that, because there are so many challenges still in the world that we need to face, and we should be working together towards facing those big challenges. But instead, we have this part of the world which is 12%, and not 12%. I think that that is not even fair, because it's not as if it's the whole people living in the West want to dominate the rest
No.
of the world, because there is I think there was a Swiss Jew, George Steiner, who used to talk about the Medusa turns inside. If you are violent towards others, and if you are ready to treat others badly, you will treat your own people like that as well.
Yeah, and we have seen that, and you and I, we talked about these famous cases of Western, I would say, luminaries who actually tried to do something against that system, and who actually tried to go hand in hand with the global South and empower also the global South,
Yeah.
including people like Olof Palme, including what was his name in Italy?
Mattei,
Mattei.
Enrico Mattei. Yes,
Enrico
yes.
Mattei, and the German.
You had Willy Brandt, no?
Yeah, no, but he wasn't assassinated, right? There was the German head of the Deutsche Bank. Anyhow, the people also in the capitalist class who actually understood that the future, a peaceful future forward, is one with the global South, not against the global South. And even within the West, they were killed, and including, of course, JFK, including Martin
Yes,
Luther King, and so
JFK.
on. A
I would
lot of
put Aldo Moro.
assassination.
I would put Aldo Moro on that list as well.
Aldo Moro, and
Mhm.
so what we see is how, for the lack of a better term, the Epstein-Class then cracks down internally on dissent and externally on then those that it for
Yes,
frames as enemies, and this is
yes.
that what then creates this mass violence.
Yes, yes, because even when we say that the rules-based order worked for the West, it worked for the elite in the West, not for the people in the West.
Yeah,
So, for example, in my case, I come from a Labour Party tradition.
right.
I know that for example, people like Tony Blair, people like Mendelssohn have a lot to answer for. People like Clinton have a lot to answer for as well, because when you have unions and political parties that were set up to promote the interests of the working people and the working class, not seen in a sectarian way, but a decent life for those who work and not for those who have money and who have capital. And then they see how they compromised with
Mhm.
the oligarchs to bring about a system where it becomes a uniparty, that basically there's no difference between the center right and the center left. Then people feel more disillusioned, because they see this network undermining those even within the same political movement. It's enough to see what Mendelssohn and Blair did to
Corbyn.
destroy Jeremy Corbyn, no?
Yeah, yeah.
And how the money from Zionist funds was used to undermine Jeremy Corbyn, to depict him as being anti-Semitic and as being fanatical and as being dangerous. And now what do you have? So you have a government which is heavily distrusted by its people, run by Starmer, and it's a big problem. And then what is the alternative? Farage? So when you go from one country to the other, destroying the credibility of people who want to give a decent life for most of the people in that country, then the alternative becomes what are called far right or far left, which is a way of, instead of really addressing what the problem is, you come up with labels to try and prolong the elite which wants to run the world in its own interests, and the world includes the people in their own country, not just the rest of the world.
Yeah, and again, that group of people really figured out how to live the good life, right? They even perfected the art of socialism among themselves, because the way capitalism works, it gives free money to those who already have a lot of
It's
money. They don't
exactly.
have to work, right? That's
So
the beauty.
it's socialism for the rich, no?
It's socialism for the rich. And then the poor are told that you need to shut up and please
Yes,
sign up for the military, because we
yes,
have 5% of budget only for those who are willing to go into uniform and then be willing to die in the East against fighting against the Russians. It's perverse and it's sick.
it
And
is.
all of that then kind of even culminating in these kind of animal-like behavior that we've seen in some of these Epstein files, right? That
But
these
that's
people
why, Pascal, the rottenness is not only in the moral depravity of how young girls and how the way women were treated, and the sex parties and things like
Mhm.
that. But it's also in what you are saying, in how you run a country, and the resources. What are they used for? Are they used for care systems, for health systems, for education, for people to live decently? And if they are ready to treat their own people like that, imagine how they are going to treat Africans, Indians, and others.
I mean, we see how they are treating Palestinians right now, right? This
Terrible.
is this is the future. I mean, this is going
Terrible.
they're gonna
It's
do that
terrible.
more.
It's terrible, and what is, I think, is even more terrible is how you use religion also to justify the fact that you are chosen by God, which means that the others are not chosen by God, and which means that others are there to serve you. The concept of goyim, that I am special, I am privileged, not only in this world, but I have been chosen to be privileged and to be special. And you are not part of this magic circle chosen by God. And because you are not chosen by God, I can treat you, I can destroy you. The politics of genocide has not been only in Palestine. It is terrible what is still going on in Palestine.
Yeah.
And the same has happened on every continent. Even when today you see one of two things that Trump did since he went into the White House was to put on his in his office pictures of former presidents who actually carried out genocide in the United States
Yeah.
to take away land from the Indians, from the indigenous Indians, and to expand the United States, not only by taking over land that belonged to uh, the natives, but also that belonged to Mexico before. So uh, then you have Carney being shocked that, hey, as long as you take over Venezuela, as long as you attack Cuba, as long as you attack Iran, that is okay. But don't do that to us, sort of. And it's the monster eating itself. But in the meantime, the casualties that it leaves on the rest of the world is terrible. And I hope that we manage to survive this very difficult time, because this is the time when usually world wars happen.
Yeah, but the only chance we have not to get out of this through a huge bloodletting, which a world war would be, is in my view if enough people kind of understand that this must be changed. The entire approach must be changed. And that's my question. As you are somebody from Malta, and Malta was itself a colony, and we see how the European parts that were colonized before by other European parts see this. Also in Ireland, Ireland has also been quite, at least publicly very differently. They understand the Gaza genocide, or approached it very differently. Maybe not on the political class. There's the political class problem there as well, but in public speech they understood it very differently. Malta understands it differently. Also, the working class seems to understand it differently. I mean, the dock workers in Italy that have did a mass uprising. Those seem to be the parts that are most clear-eyed about how the system works. Where else do you see within the Western system the places where we would need to start to proselytize in order to get away from this catastrophe that we are maneuvering ourselves into?
Yeah, it's important to explain, and that is why I think even the work that you do is very important. That there are alternative voices that are heard and that can discuss these issues. Not to allow the dominant language to be the language of the elite, that they define the debate not only by talking what they talk about, but by also being silent about a lot of things. So what I think what is important as much as possible is to relate to people, to be patient with people, to explain to people what is going on. A lot of people understand because they know that they are suffering. This is one of the problems that I think the elites will have in the States, where we see that it's one thing campaigning and saying you're going to solve the cost of living, you're going to bring rents down, you're going to generate employment, and then time is passing and this doesn't happen. The same is going on in Western Europe and in the European Union, where people feel that public services are not delivering, where social services are being undermined. What is important is to tie together the issues of justice, of a decent, daily life, and peace, to 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 bring them together because they are together.
How shall we call this? How shall we call this wish, or this project? Because it's a form of decolonization, but it's decolonization at home. Shall we call it like uncolonizing the West? Because it seems to me in the West we haven't understood that we're still colonial, right? We still operate under clearly colonial uh, on a colonial operating system, right? So uncolonize the West, or what do we need to do?
Yes, and Pascal, this is where I see that again the elites, I would say the elites of both right and left. I have to
Yeah, yeah.
admit, that's how they use immigration.
Yes.
Immigration is also being used as a form of continuing colonialism,
Yeah.
because if despite the terrible demographic decline that the European Union is facing, and that is one of the biggest challenges that the European Union does not talk about. At the same time that babies are not being born, and we are losing 1 million every year of persons in working age, which the European Union does not have. In 25 years, that is going to accumulate to 25 million. Where is okay, there is automation, there is AI, there will be robotics, but will that be enough to replace the workers that you don't have? Now, if the only other way is to bring in, in a managed way, migrants, but if at the same time you are not treating migrants like human beings and like full human beings, which means that you are treating them like citizens, how is that going to work?
And
And if you treat badly those people in your own country, that also shows your mentality and your attitude towards them in their own countries.
And this is the point where actually the political right then falls into the trap of this colonial thinking, of then applying basically colonial concepts to the inside, and say like, no, we need to get rid of them and put them away. The only place where I think that there's common ground is the those people on the right who say like, we need to push them away, but we need to make sure that we don't bomb their houses so that they don't come. That's that's the ones that I think are have a quite sane approach. But I still think it's falling for the trap of this colonial way of viewing the world of them and us. And then somehow there needs to be dominance. There needs to be dominance over the migrants internally in order then to manage.
Because I think tragically what happened, Pascal, for a certain amount of time was that the question was treated very irrationally and in a very polarized way.
Yeah,
Those who sided with the migrants and those who sided with the natives. Whereas in fact, there are legitimate concerns on both sides
of course.
that need to be addressed. And the way is to try and find a peaceful coexistence within these countries. Because, for example, in my case, I'm coming from a small country where basically about more than 35% now of our people are coming from many different countries around the world. People start feeling anxious and uneasy as if they are being displaced themselves in
Yeah,
terms of the language that they use, their culture, their habits. So you have to address that as well. We already have villages and towns where the majority are people coming from other countries. So you need to deal with that, because otherwise you will have racism, otherwise you'll have xenophobia, but you need to deal with it in a realistic human way, not whip up hysteria which says that every problem that you have in your country is because you are being overrun by migrants. It's one of the biggest issues I think that even the European Union is facing, and it also shows what we're saying, the inability to deal with how to treat people of different cultures and of different civilizations.
yeah. And there are no silver bullets, and I would never actually want to make colleagues and friends on the conservative side angry about this, because, as you said, there are very legitimate concerns, and they need to be
Yes,
dealt with.
yes,
But
yes.
the but I think one of the underlying issues really is still this colonial mindset in the West, and it's coming out to the fore now more and more. So basically, what we need to do is to create an awareness for the fact that colonialism is not something that ended 80, 90 years ago. Colonialism is with us, it's alive, and it's not just neocolonialism, it is classic colonialism, it's a colonial mindset, it's a colonial approach at international and local affairs. And we need to grapple with that, otherwise we're going to destroy ourselves.
And I think what is tragic is, I think, the shortcomings of unions in European countries that are not organizing migrant workers. They operate under the illusion. They don't admit it, but I know that they are operating under the illusion that you can have two different workforces, two different labor forces, that you protect your own workers who have been born in your country, and usually they are working in the public sector. So you improve their salaries, you improve their working conditions, and you allow the migrants to do the work that your people don't want to do anymore. Might be in public cleansing, might be in care, might be in catering, might be in construction, and you don't organize them to improve their conditions. Now, that is very dangerous, because by undermining their working conditions, you are also undermining the working conditions of your countries and of your workers, which means that it is one labor force, it is one workforce. And if you let it be fragmented the way it is, then you'll have also your workers feeling resentful against the migrants by, they are accepting lower wages, they are
Mhm.
accepting poorer working conditions, so they are our enemies. So instead of having solidarity and working together, it's the unions are actually protecting those who are already in a better position. But the fact that they are not organizing migrant workers, this is perpetuating division and lack of solidarity, even in our countries, which brings its own problems there.
It does. It does. And the approach to deal with this in a sustainable way is to probably, in my view, to look at it holistically, right? The main problem that there are a lot of migrants in Europe is that a lot of these people who migrate involuntarily. Yes, they come because they want, or even on boats, but they do so because they try to escape the poverty at home and the violence and so on. And much of this violence is caused by the system that was created
But
by people in Europe, right? So
this also, yes,
if
yes.
if the unions start approaching this as an issue that needs to be solved there and here, we will get to a place where migration would go down to a level where a natural level of migration. There's always people who move around. I mean, I'm a migrant in Japan, but I tell you, a majority, 90% of Swiss likes living in Switzerland. 10% then goes out, but they also go back again. Right?
Yes,
And that's what would happen naturally around the world if we manage to improve globally the situation and not just for the 1% of
but
the Epstein class.
what is ironic, Pascal, is that for many years, millions of Europeans went to the United States,
Of
went to
course.
Australia, went
Yeah,
to
yeah, of
Canada,
course. Of course. Of course.
went to these countries.
And
But I think
genocided them.
exactly. But I think we also need to go back to one of the deep, I think, intuitions of Marx in the 1840s when he said, if the working class in the empires do not have solidarity with the working class of the colonized, they will also be part of the problem. I think that is a deep intuition because Marx has not been studied enough in terms of nationalism and sovereignty. When he writes about the Irish question and when he writes about colonists, he has intuitions which Marxists in the West have not given attention to.
Right.
They were very provincial. So, if, as we're saying, this kind of network of solidarity needs to be built across cultures, across civilizations. Because if we don't do that, we will have serious problems and the continuation of colonialism, which means the continuation of domination and domination coupled with military power, which is suicidal.
Yeah, it will end in the deaths of millions, without doubt, tens of millions, and this iceberg must be avoided if we somehow still can steer the ship away from it, which is why I'm so glad that you're also like sharing that kind of analysis. Um, is there one more thing, something more that we haven't talked about yet in this discussion that is important to understand where we're in? Also like looking again at Munich and Rubio and so on.
Well, I think first of all we need to take something like the speech of Rubio and actually say underline what he's saying, and the reaction to it by the European elites was really telling, in the sense that there he was lamenting the fact that the empires are not strong anymore, and let us not feel ashamed and guilty about what we did. I mean,
And
that
that,
is, to say it like that so arrogantly.
but that reminds me of the garden speech the
Yes.
by your
Borrell,
former
no?
colleague Borrell, and you know
Borrell.
Borrell, right? You know him personally. I mean,
I,
what is it that he didn't understand that this was kind of an unacceptable way of depicting the world? I mean, did you ever talk about this with him?
yes, yes.
Why
It's only fair to say that after that he regretted he
he did?
regretted the metaphor of the garden. I know Borrell. I still feel very, very warm towards it. I also know how he felt about the former colonists, but that was very unfortunate. And it was a continuation of other speeches given by others where they said, "Listen, the rule of law applies for us because we're the civilized West.
Yes,
The rest of the world." We need to deal with them, because they are the jungle. We need to treat them with invasions, coup d'etats, using hard power over there, killing
right.
them and destroying them. That is what is terrible. I think what might help us is if we work more to make people understand that our destiny is a common destiny. So, for example, telling them, the issue in Iran concerns us because if they close the Strait of Hormuz, the price of oil is going up and your cost of living is going up and you're going to suffer. So it doesn't mean it's a problem which is far away. It's here as well. So it's having a shared destiny, and trying to explain that in this small world, we're all interconnected somehow or other. We're all interdependent, and what happens on one side of the globe ultimately somehow or other affects you as well. We need to continue doing that.
Yeah, yeah, we need to, and figure out the right approach. Keep thinking.
Also humanizing issues, I think that is very important, that we talk of these issues not in terms of geopolitical concepts and ideas, but also how it affects people in their daily lives, and to humanize these issues as much as possible, because sometimes this is what populists manage to do much better than others. That they are talking about, your concern, your job, your identity, your feeling of belonging. We need to do that when we talk about peace, and when we talk about coexistence. It's important that it's not as if we are carrying out an intellectual crusade where we're dealing with abstract concepts, but we're dealing with issues of life and death in our daily lives. We need to do that over and over again, to talk about these matters as if people matter, not
Yeah,
not just concepts and wishful thinking.
yeah, yeah, and we want peace because we want to keep people alive, right? We like people around, not in
Exactly.
graves. That's why we need peace. So in a sense, we are just concerned about the health and well-being of people, right? So that's why we need to avoid war because it's very unhealthy. Um, Good.
And
Everett.
people understand that. People understand that, and that's why when we look at how young people are reacting to when they are asked, "Are you ready? Are you ready to die in wars?" The question is, are they ready to die for the elites that come
Yeah,
through in the Epstein files? Because basically, that's what these elites are asking young people to do, to die for them. And usually, it's not the first time that these elites are on both sides in a war, are on both sides. Recently I was looking at how bankers in the Second World War, even in Swedish bankers and even American bankers, were financing both the war effort of the Allies, but also the war effort of the Axis. That money was going to Hitler as well, not just to the American factories that were turning out American armaments for the Allies, but also uh, and and when the Nuremberg trials took place, none of the people who worked, with their jackets still on and ties in New York, in Stockholm, none of them were brought to justice as if they were enabling war of the Axis because they made money available to to both sides of the war.
nor were the people nor were the people put on trial who financed the atomic bomb and the incineration of millions in with the implements of war, right? All of those are well shielded. The only
Yeah.
ones who are not shielded are then the ones who lose the war, so they will naturally be punished. So at least those guys could be
So we need, I think
among
we need we need to keep on showing where that there are the laws of the
yeah.
gods and the laws of the animals, and that we are on the side of ordinary human beings who are
Yeah.
treated as animals by the gods.
Yeah, yeah. So let's free the animals and herd in the gods to and just hope that nobody ever finds out that some animals are more equal than others. But
Yes.
My friend Evarist, thank you very much for
Thank
this
you.
talk. People who want to find your work, they should go and find and read your articles. You regularly publish here, right? In the Times of
In
Malta.
Malta, and then I upload them on my website, and I hope that I'm in the process of getting into Substack as well.
It's
Finally.
a wonderful platform. I highly
Yes,
recommend
that's
it.
what I'm told. That's what I'm told. Thank
Tell me
you.
when you have it so that I can spread the good word, okay?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Evarist Bartolo,
All the
thank you
best.
very much for your time today.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.